There you go, Agnesio. Right. So I've just talked about duties to client, right? The five concepts. Right. So 3A, duty of loyalty, right, and act with reasonable care and judgment. Okay, quite straightforward, right? Act for the benefit of the client, right? So your client benefit comes first, right? And client's interest comes first. Okay, so this is your loyalty, right? So determine applicable fiduciary duty, right? So you must determine what is your applicable fiduciary duty, right? Fiduciary, right? So basically you're looking after the money matters, right, of your client. So what kind of money matters, right? Investment matters, right? So there must be a contract. So you just follow the contract, okay? The applicable fiduciary duty, right? And you must comply with such duty. Right, so 3B, fair dealing. Fair dealing. So you must deal fairly and objectively. In what circumstances? When you undertake investment analysis, recommendations, actions, or other professional activities. So, right, so the keywords are fairly and objectively. Okay. Suitability. So basically, this fiduciary duty, right, is an investment relationship. Okay, so to determine what is suitable, right, you must make a reasonable inquiry, right? You must know what your client's current situation is. Okay, so basically, this point here, A, right? You must make a reasonable inquiry into your client's or investment experience, the risk return objective, right? So this part here, right? Or financial constraints, right? Okay, prior to making any recommendations, right? At the very onset, you must do all this, make a reasonable inquiry, right? So having done that, right, you must align your investment plan. So you design this investment plan, right? So your client's objective, mandates, and constraints, right, are obtained from this inquiry. Is from here, right? So it's from this reasonable inquiry. You deduce what your client's objectives are, his mandates and constraints, right? Before making any investment recommendation or taking investment action, right? So having done that, right, then after you've drawn up a plan, right, you judge, right, the suitability, right? So this is what suitability is about, right? Suitability of investments that you recommended, right, in the context of the client's total portfolio, right? So I'm sure you learn about other concepts in other subjects, right? It's about so you talk about correlation, right? Whether the additional investment, how does it correlate to the existing portfolio? How does it affect the portfolio? Remember terms like beta that you learn in other subjects? Okay. So after having done all these three, right? After having done all these three, you only make investment recommendations or actions, right? Consistent with the stated objectives and constraints, right? So you must do all these three, so this is what suitability is about. The 3D, right? Performance presentation. So basically, in your performance presentation, right? You must make sure that the three keywords, it is fair, accurate, and complete, right? That means you must not mislead. Okay, so your client must have a fair and accurate and complete picture. Okay, 3E, right. Your client would have a lot of information with you, right? All this information, right? So you must keep the information about whether the client is current, former, or prospective, right? You must keep it confidential, right? You must keep it confidential, right? Unless, right? Unless the information concerns illegal activities, right? On the part of a client or prospective client. So this is a judgment call on your part. You have to decide. So I mean, it's a bit hard, right? All right. So and unless the second point, right, disclosure is required by law. Well, you have to do it. You may lose the client, but you may have to do it. And the third point, right, your client or prospective client permits the disclosure. So unless you have these three issues, right, you must keep your client's information confidential, right? So this is what preservation of confidentiality is about. All right, is that clear? Right, so standard 3, we talk about duties to clients. Now we talk about duties to employer, right? Now for your employer, basically you should, we have these three issues to deal with, loyalty to your employer, right? And how do we deal with additional compensation arrangements? Right, your employer pays you, but how do you deal with this issue of additional compensation arrangements? Right, so when you work, right, you'll be probably working under a supervisor, or you yourself may be a supervisor, right? So we'll talk about the issues of responsibilities of supervisors here. Right, so the first issue here is about loyalty. Right, basically, obviously, you should be loyal to your employer, right? So you must act for the benefit of your employer, right? And not deprive, right? And not deprive your employer of the advantage of your skill, ability, right? And you must not divulge confidential information about your employer, okay? And you must not cause harm to your employer. Basically, this is what loyalty is about, okay? Right. Okay, so 4B. Now, how do you deal with additional compensation arrangements? Right, so your employer already paid you, right? So basically, other third parties may give you something, right? So basically, under this 4B, you must not accept any form of compensation, right? Any form, right? That creates any conflict of interest, right? The issue here is about conflict of interest being created, right? Conflict of interest with the employer's interest, right? Unless, right, you have written consent from all parties involved, right? So the key issue is, so unless you have written consent, right? So 4C, right? Because you're working for an employer, right? You may be under the supervision of your employer, right? Or you yourself may be a supervisor, right? So here we talk about responsibilities of supervisors. So you must make reasonable efforts to detect and prevent violations of applicable, you know, laws, rules, regulations, and the code of standard by anyone subject to their supervision, right? So basically, it's about the responsibilities of supervisors. Right. So now we talk about standard 5, right? Standard 5, how to deal with investment analysis, recommendations, and actions. Basically, there's 3 issues here, right? In your investment analysis, recommendations, and actions, right? You must act with diligence. You know what's diligence, right? Enough hard work, and you must have a reasonable basis, right, for your investment analysis, recommendations, and actions. Okay, so you must put in enough work, enough hard work, and you must have a basis. All right. Okay, so this is one issue. The second issue, 5B, right, is about communication. About all the investment analysis, recommendation, and actions, with your client and prospective client. So the communication part is also very important. After you've satisfied A. All right. So in your investment analysis, recommendations, and actions, right, you must have a basis, right? So this basis must be kept in the form of record retention. You with me? You must be in black and white. You must have some records to substantiate what is the basis. Okay. Right. So 5A, right, you must have a diligence and reasonable basis. So you should exercise diligence, right, independence, and thoroughness in analyzing, recommending, and implementing. Right. So you must have a reasonable basis. Reasonable, adequate, and substantial basis, right? You must have a basis. Right. So in your communication, right, you basically you should have a format, in your communication, and what are the general principles that you're trying to communicate, right? And whether there's any changes. So in your communication, you must be update. There must be updates. Right? So you must promptly disclose any changes, right? That might materially affect all these processes. And you must use reasonable judgment, right, in identifying the relevant important factors. Okay, so the important thing is you must distinguish between facts and opinions. These two. This is very important in your communication. So you must be clear on this. Okay. I'll just finish with this slide, even though it's nearly time. Right. So the fifth 5C, right, is about record retention. Okay. So this will form the basis. Right. So you must maintain appropriate record, right, to support, whatever you have done. Okay. Record retention. Right. So last one, 6, right, conflict of interest. How do you deal with, obviously there'll be conflicts, right? So how do you disclose it? Right. So in when you have conflict of interest, you have priority of transaction. Which comes first? Which is more important? And how do you deal with the issue of referral fees? Because referral fees would also create conflict of interest. All right. So basically in 6A, right, you must make full and fair disclosure of all matters that could reasonably be expected to impair, reasonably expected to impair, one's independence and objectivity, right? So full and fair disclosure is important. And communication is important, right? So you must ensure that this point here, such disclosure are prominent, plain language, and effectively communication. So communication must be clear to avoid any misunderstanding. Right, then 6B is about priority of transaction, right? Conflict of interest. So which comes first, right? Investment transactions for clients, employers, right? Clients and employers must have priority. So that means your client and your employers must have priority over your own investment transactions. Okay. Last issue is about referral fees, right? You may get referral fees in the course of your work, so you must disclose, to your employer, clients, because these are all the stakeholders, right? As appropriate, right? So these referral fees can come in the form of any compensation, consideration. It may not be just money. It may be some others type of consideration, right? Or it could be some benefit, that you may receive or pay to others, for recommendation. So how do you deal with this issue of referral fees? Okay, so when I say fees here, it's not just money, because it can be consideration, any consideration or any benefit. Okay. Right. So basically, I've finished. So right. So I have posted all the material on e-learning. So because this is a short semester, I hope you will try to read in advance, because you have to read it anyway. Okay. I'll see you on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Right. If there's no questions, we'll call it a day. I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you.